They say the land remembers. Blood soaks differently into Missouri soil than rain does. It leaves a mark that outlasts the seasons. The valley knows this truth better than most. In 1823, this quiet stretch of wilderness witnessed something the territory had never seen before: a widow who turned an entire valley into a weapon. Not with armies or cannons, but with the precise calculations of an engineer's mind and the cold determination of a heart that had nothing left to lose. When 25 armed men rode in confident in their numbers and the weakness of their prey, they couldn't see the traps laid in shadow, the tripwires hidden beneath fallen leaves, the modified flintlocks aimed at vital crossroads. They only saw a homestead, a gold claim, and what they assumed was an easy target. By the time they realized their mistake, the valley had already begun to collect its due. Some legends are born in blood, some in courage. This one began when outlaws cornered a widow and sealed their fate. They say the land remembers. Blood soaks differently into Missouri soil than rain. Does it leaves a mark that outlasts the seasons? The valley knows this truth better than most. In 1823, this quiet stretch of wilderness witnessed something the territory had never seen before: a widow who turned an entire valley into a weapon. Not with armies or cannons, but with the precise calculations of an engineer's mind and the cold determination of a heart that had nothing left to lose. When 25 armed men rode in confident in their numbers and the weakness of their prey, they couldn't see the traps laid in shadow, the tripwires hidden beneath fallen leaves, the modified flintlocks aimed at vital crossroads. They only saw a homestead, a gold claim, and what they assumed was an easy target. By the time they realized their mistake, the valley had already begun to collect its due. Some legends are born in blood, some in courage. This one began when outlaws cornered a widow and sealed their fate. The sun rose slowly over the Independence Mountains, casting a dull golden glow across the arid valley. At a small homestead nestled deep within the valley, Catherine McRae had been awake for hours. Her calloused fingers traced gently over the framed picture beside her bed, the face of John, her departed husband. Each day she wondered if this would be the last time she'd look upon that face. A year had passed since she found his body. A year since Wade Blackwood's men had severed John's head and hung it on the homestead gate as a warning. A year since she buried what remained of the gentle man who had brought her to this valley to start a new life away from the ghosts of the battlefield. Kate, as the locals called her, was no longer the woman she'd been a year ago. Her dark auburn hair, now cropped short to her ears, her pale green eyes grown cold and sharp, and the hands that once skillfully bandaged wounds now hardened from holding rifles and weaving steel traps. She stepped outside her small wooden cabin, breathing in the crisp morning air. From here, she could see the entire expanse of Independence Valley, a remote valley in Missouri Territory, where in this year of 1823, law was a distant concept and justice rested in the hands of those who were strongest or smartest. "Another day, John," she whispered to the air. "Another day to prepare." Kate was no ordinary farmer's wife. Before meeting John, she was Catherine Davenport, one of the few women to serve in the War of 1812, not as a nurse or laundress, but as an artillery engineer designing and building defensive fortifications. She had disguised herself as a man to join the army, where her talent for understanding terrain and calculations had made her one of the rare specialists in fortifications and traps. Until her secret was discovered and she was forced to leave, Catherine had learned to turn any landscape into a deadly weapon. She took her shovel and began her work for the day, digging another pit trap on the eastern side of the valley. This was the 23rd trap in the defensive system she had quietly built over the past year. Widow McRae. The call from a distance startled Kate. She quickly covered the freshly dug pit with dry branches and pulled a flintlock pistol from her belt. She squinted toward the sound, recognizing the familiar figure of Sheriff Franklin Stowe riding toward her. Sheriff Stowe was the only person from Valley Cross, 2 days' ride away, that Kate still trusted. An aging man with a white beard and kind eyes behind spectacles, Stowe was an old friend of John's and a fellow war veteran. He understood the grief Kate carried, and more importantly, he was the only one who knew about her military past. "Sheriff Stowe." Kate nodded in greeting, lowering her pistol, but keeping it in hand. "It's a 2-day ride from town. Must be important." Stowe dismounted, worry evident on his weathered face. "I need to speak with you, Catherine. Bad news." They entered the wooden cabin. Kate poured Stowe a cup of watered-down whiskey, the only thing she still kept from John's time. She didn't drink. She wouldn't allow herself anything that might dull her senses. "Wade Blackwood is coming back," Stowe said bluntly. Kate showed no surprise, but her hands tightened. "When?" "Within a week. He's gathered 20 men outlaws, killers with records some ex-soldiers cast aside after the war. They're well-armed rifles, pistols, even a small cannon. What do they want? My land is still just a barren valley." Stowe took a sip of whiskey, his eyes meeting Kate's directly. "I've made inquiries. Gold, Catherine. There's a vein running under this valley. Small but valuable. John knew. That's why he never sold this land, and that's why Blackwood killed him." Kate looked out the window toward the small hill where she had buried John. For a year, she had wondered why the outlaws had been so brutal to a gentle farmer like her husband. Now she had her answer. "You're warning me to flee?" she said, not a question. "I have a wagon. I could take you to St. Louis. You have relatives there, don't you?" Kate shook her head. "I have no one, and I'm not going anywhere." "Catherine, you don't understand. Blackwood doesn't just want the land. He wants an example. He's been telling people he'll make the arrogant widow a lesson for anyone who dares stand in his way. I know exactly who he is, Sheriff, and I know exactly what he's capable of." Kate turned back to face Stowe, her gaze chillingly cold. "But you don't know who I am and what I'm capable of." Stowe was silent for a moment, then sighed. "You have a plan." I've been preparing for the past year." She led Stowe outside across the small garden, where she grew vegetables and herbs, partly for food, partly for medicines. They walked toward an old storage shed nestled under the canopy of a large oak tree. Inside, what Stowe saw left him stunned. Spread across the wall was a detailed map of the entire valley, meticulously drawn with marked points, colored lines, and annotations. On the shelves were strange implements, specially braided ropes, bent metal pieces, hollowed bamboo, and wooden tubes. In the corner, a stack of gunpowder and glass bottles containing various liquids were neatly arranged. "Good Lord," Stowe whispered. "No," Kate said, her voice even. "Just a woman and time." She pointed to the map. "Each red dot is a pit trap. The blue lines are hidden barriers. When activated, they'll block the trails. The yellow dots are ignition points. I can set those areas on fire remotely using fuse lines. And the black dotted lines are tunnels and caves that I've explored and expanded." Stowe looked at Kate with new eyes, not with pity, but with respect mixed with concern. "Catherine, you did all this alone." "I used to command a unit of artillery engineers, Sheriff. I know how to turn terrain into a weapon. But there are 20 of them, and they're killers." Kate opened a drawer beneath the table and pulled out a modified rifle with a homemade scope and an intricately carved stock. "So am I, if necessary." Stowe nodded slowly, understanding that nothing would change this woman's resolve. "I'll go back to town, try to gather some men, but I'm not sure how many will come. Blackwood has spread fear throughout the region. You don't need to bring people here, Sheriff. If possible, evacuate everyone from town for the next few weeks. What's about to happen here? No one should witness it." Before leaving, Stowe handed Kate a small notebook. "This is what I know about Blackwood and his men name's weapons habits. If there's any chance—" Kate took the notebook, her eyes softening slightly. "Thank you, Franklin, for everything." They parted as the sun climbed high. Kate watched Stowe's silhouette disappear behind the hills, knowing it might be the last time she'd see her only friend. 3 days later, Kate was finishing a deadfall trap on the southern trail when she spotted a riderless horse galloping toward the homestead. Her heart sank as she recognized Stowe's mount. She ran to intercept it, catching the reins of the panicked animal. Dried blood crusted the saddle, but there was no sign of the sheriff. Kate checked the saddlebags and saw they had been slashed. Someone had searched through the belongings. But when she removed the saddle, a small notebook fell out, hidden within the saddle padding. With trembling hands, Kate opened the notebook. It was Stowe's journal, and the final entries were hastily written, the handwriting erratic, ambushed 5 miles south of Valley Cross. Blackwood knew. 25 men, not 20, moving toward Valley via northwest route, will arrive in 3 days. Hope Kate finds this. God help. The writing ended with a smear of blood. Kate clutched the notebook to her chest. "He died for me," she whispered, her voice choked. But in an instant, the pain was replaced by something colder, harder. She had no time for grief. Now she knew exactly where and when the enemy would come. For the next 3 days, Kate worked tirelessly, stopping only to eat hurried meals and catch brief moments of sleep. She completed the final traps on the northwestern entrance to the valley where the gang would arrive. She prepared weapons rifles, 2 flintlock pistols, knives, a bow with arrows, and makeshift weapons fashioned from farm implement parts. On the final night before the gang's arrival, Kate stood before John's portrait, dressed in her battle attire. Men's trousers, a hardened leather jacket, and a dark crimson scarf the color of blood and fire. "I won't let them take your land," she vowed, her hand gently stroking the homemade flintlock pistol with John's name carved into the grip. "Either them or me. No one walks away." She sent Stowe's horse away with a slap to its rump, knowing the animal would find its way back to the stable in Valley Cross. She wouldn't need it anymore. From now on, Kate would move on foot and through paths only she knew. At dawn the next morning, with fog still thick in the valley, Kate heard the first hoofbeats. She was hidden on a high rock overlooking the northwestern entrance. Through her homemade spyglass, she could see them, at least 25 men on horseback, armed to the teeth, led by a tall man with black hair and a thick beard. Wade Blackwood, her husband's killer, had arrived. Kate smiled coldly as they approached the first trap. She raised her rifle, carefully aimed at a camouflage rope stretched across the trail, and pulled the trigger. The gunshot echoed, the rope snapped in two, and hundreds of rocks began tumbling down the hillside directly toward the procession. Screams and panicked horse whinnies filled the still morning air. The game had begun. 2 outlaws died, instantly crushed beneath the falling rocks. 3 others were severely injured. The rest of the gang panicked, scrambling to escape the avalanche. Kate was gone before the dust settled, moving quickly through the secret paths she had created. She needed to reach the next position before they understood what was happening. Wade Blackwood stood amidst the rubble, eyes looking up to the hillside where the gunshot had come from. A thin smile appeared on his sun-weathered face. "So the Widow McRae wants to play," he said, his voice deep and rough. "Davis Johnson, go up there and see what the hell just happened. The rest follow me. We'll find another way in." 2 outlaws split off, climbing the hillside, while the remainder of the gang followed Wade, seeking another entrance to the valley. They didn't know that both men sent away would never return, heading straight into a cleverly disguised pit trap with poisoned wooden spikes at the bottom. Wade led the remaining men along another trail, narrower but seemingly safer. They didn't know that Kate had precisely predicted this action, and that path led directly into the heart of her trap system. As the first rays of sunlight cut through the mist, a second scream echoed from the hillside, where the 2 outlaws had disappeared. And before that sound faded, a strange whistling began from the surrounding forest, the sound of wind flutes Kate had placed throughout, creating the illusion of many people watching from the trees. "There's people in the woods," an outlaw shouted, raising his gun and firing at shadows. "Fool," Wade barked. "It's just the wind. Focus on the path." "Otto." But at that moment, a real rifle shot rang out from a high position, and one of the outlaws fell, a bullet through his throat. "Find her," Wade roared, but a second shot came from an entirely different direction, and another outlaw dropped, his head split open. Kate was using techniques she'd learned in war: shoot and move, never staying in one position too long. With intimate knowledge of the terrain, she could move swiftly between pre-prepared positions, while the outlaws floundered in her deadly maze. The first day ended with 7 outlaws dead, 2 from the rock slide, 2 from the pit trap, and 3 shot by Kate. Blackwood's gang, initially confident and aggressive, had now grown cautious and fearful. Wade led his remaining men to a clearing, established camp, and set guards. He knew they were facing no ordinary enemy, not a helpless widow, but a true warrior. Blackwood, an outlaw named Digger Wright, approached. He was a bounty hunter, the best tracker in the region. "I found tracks, just one person, a woman, but she moves like a ghost and knows every inch of this valley." "She was expecting us," Wade hissed, looking around at the darkened forest. "How far does her arm reach? Is this entire valley a trap?" "I believe so, sir," Digger nodded. "But every trap has a weakness. I'll find it." Wade stared into the darkness of the valley. "Listen here, Widow McRae," he shouted. "I don't know who you are or where you learned these tricks, but I have more men, more guns. You can't kill us all." Only the wind answered, and the mysterious whistling from the wind flutes. Wade turned to Digger. "Send a man to Valley Cross. Tell them to bring more men and weapons. This game is about to change." Meanwhile, not far away, Kate was hidden in a small rock cave she had transformed into one of many secret bases. She was cleaning a small wound on her hand, the result of moving too quickly through an area of sharp rocks. She listened to Wade's shouts in the night and smiled coldly. Day 17, men, she said to herself. 18 more to go. She opened Stowe's notebook, studying the notes about Wade and his men. Digger Wright, bounty hunter, dangerous, a good shot, and able to track in any conditions. She would need to be careful of him. Kate suddenly heard a small noise outside the cave. She quickly extinguished the oil lamp and drew her knife, listening. After a while, she breathed a sigh of relief when she realized it was just a rabbit. But vigilance was vital. She decided not to light any more fires tonight, instead curling up in her blanket and trying to catch some sleep. Tomorrow, she whispered into the darkness, her hand tightening on her pistol. Tomorrow they'll see how truly dangerous this valley is. When dawn came, Kate was in position, observing the outlaws' camp from a distant hillside. She saw one rider leave, probably carrying a message to Valley Cross. She let him go, knowing that the road to town was now clear, and hoping that Stowe had succeeded in evacuating the villagers. Her plan for today was to lure the outlaws into the eastern forest, where she had prepared an elaborate system of traps and smoke tubes that could spew burning tar when activated. Kate aimed her rifle and fired a shot into the air, then quickly moved to another position. As expected, a group of about 6 outlaws split off from the camp, pursuing the direction of the gunshot. She continued to shoot and move, luring them deeper into the forest, straight into her trap. Wade and the remainder of the gang stayed at camp on high alert. He was no longer foolish enough to chase after gunshots. Instead, he had divided his men into small groups, hoping that at least one would find and kill the mysterious widow. In the forest, Kate activated the first trap, a row of sharpened wooden stakes that sprang up from the ground, impaling the legs of the 2 lead outlaws' horses. In the painful whinnying of horses and men's shouts, she triggered the second trap. Smoke tubes began spewing burning tar, creating a wall of fire. The 4 remaining outlaws panicked, trying to turn back, but discovering that their path was blocked by fire. They were forced to go deeper into the forest, exactly where Kate wanted them. From a hidden position in a tree, Kate aimed her rifle and shot 2 outlaws through the smoke. The remaining 2 jumped off their horses, sought cover, and began blindly shooting back. Kate remained silent, moving quietly among the branches. She had learned this from a native scout during the war, how to become part of the forest, making no sound. One outlaw, too frightened, began to run. Kate let him run straight into another pit trap, where sharpened wooden stakes waited. The last one, smarter, tried to find his way back to Wade's camp. But as he neared the edge of the forest, an arrow from Kate's bow pierced his throat. 6, Kate whispered, lowering her bow. 12 to go. But Kate knew her hit-and-run tactics wouldn't work forever. Within a short time, Wade would adapt and change strategy. She needed to use her advantages wisely. When returning to one of her secret bases to rest and plan for the next day, Kate discovered something that made her heart sink. Footprints, not hers and not from wildlife. Someone had found one of her secret paths. She drew her knife and slowly entered the cave, all her senses on high alert. But the cave was empty, though clearly someone had been there. Her supplies had been disturbed. A bag of food was missing. Kate quickly left the cave, knowing it was no longer safe. She needed to find a new shelter for tonight. But as she moved through the forest, the feeling of being watched grew stronger. Digger Wright, the bounty hunter, must have found her trail. The second night passed in tension, with Kate not daring to sleep more than an hour at a time. She changed positions 3 times during the night, never staying too long in one place. When the dawn of the 3rd day arrived, Kate looked down into the valley and saw a sight that chilled her. A new procession was entering, at least 15 more men, well armed, even pulling a small cannon on a cart. Wade had called for reinforcements, and now Kate was facing more than 25 enemies without the element of surprise. "There's still time to surrender, Catherine," a voice sounded from behind her. Kate spun around, gun already cocked, but what she saw made her pause. It was Thomas Reed, a neighbor who lived about 5 miles from her homestead, a middle-aged man with reddish-brown hair and pale blue eyes who often brought her game meat and vegetables from his garden. "Thomas," she asked, her gun still pointed at him, "what are you doing here? I thought you evacuated with the others." Reed raised both hands, his expression sad. "I came to warn you, Catherine. Wade has called for more men, and they know about the western area. You need to leave now." Kate narrowed her eyes, suspicious. How do you know Wade called for more men, and how did you find me here? Reed sighed, lowering his hands. I know this valley almost as well as you do, Catherine. I lived here before you and John arrived, and I know about Wade because I overheard them talking at their camp. You risked getting close to their camp. Kate still didn't lower her gun. I want to help Catherine. John was my friend. I know what you're doing that traps the defense system. I've seen you working all year, and I've kept your secret. Kate considered Reed's words. It was true that he had always been friendly, and John had spoken of Reed as a good man. But she no longer trusted anyone. I'm not going anywhere, Thomas. This is John's land, our land. I won't let them take it. Reed shook his head sadly. Then let me help. I know how to use a gun, and I know secret paths that you might not have found. Kate hesitated but finally lowered her gun. An ally could be the difference between life and death. All right, but you'll do exactly what I say. And if you betray me, I won't, Catherine. I swear. With Reed's help, Kate began planning the next phase. She couldn't continue her hit-and-run tactics when facing so many enemies. She needed to force Wade to make a mistake. They'll search the homestead, Reed said. Wade thinks you're hiding there, possibly in some secret bunker. Kate nodded, a plan forming in her mind. Then we'll let them find that bunker. But it will be a trap. Konami, for the next 2 days, Kate and Reed worked together, turning the storage shed near the homestead into an elaborate trap. On the outside, it looked like a fortified shelter. Thick wooden doors sealed windows. But inside, they had placed explosives connected to a tripwire that would activate when the door was breached. At the same time, Kate continued to use her system of wind flutes and other noises to create the illusion of many people hiding in the forest, keeping Blackwood's gang tense and confused. Wade, now with over 25 men, had changed his strategy. Instead of splitting up, he kept his men concentrated in one large group, moving slowly but safely through the valley. The small cannon was placed at the center, ready to attack any position where he suspected enemies might be hiding. On the 5th day, Wade's procession finally approached Kate's homestead. As expected, they found the storage shed, and after some hesitation, decided to attack it. Kate and Reed were hidden on a hillside not far away, observing through a spyglass. Ready, Kate whispered as she watched the outlaws break down the shed door. The explosion echoed throughout the valley, powerful enough to shake the ground beneath their feet. A massive fireball erupted from the shed, engulfing everything within a 20-yard radius. As the smoke and dust settled, Kate looked through the spyglass and counted the bodies. 6, she said, and several others appear wounded. Wade, Reed asked. Still alive. He stayed back. Kate put away the spyglass. We need to move. They'll search everywhere after this. They quickly retreated into the forest, moving toward the cave system Kate had prepared as a final refuge. But as they were crossing a clearing, a gunshot rang out, and Kate felt a sharp pain in her left shoulder. She felt blood soaking through her shirt. Reed pulled her to the edge of the forest, avoiding further shots. Dig her right, Kate hissed, pressing her hand against the wound. He found us. Reed quickly tore a strip of cloth from his shirt, binding Kate's wound tightly. Can you move? Kate nodded, biting her lip to keep from crying out in pain. We need to get to the caves. We have the advantage there. They continued moving slower, but still determined. Kate could feel the blood continuing to flow, and the pain was getting worse. But she couldn't stop. Stopping meant death. When they finally reached the cave entrance, night had fallen. Reed helped Kate inside, propped her against the rock wall, and began lighting lamps. Let me see the wound, he said, kneeling beside her. Kate allowed Reed to remove her jacket and examine the wound. The bullet had gone through her left shoulder, leaving a clean hole. You're lucky, Reed said. The bullet went through, it's not lodged inside, but you've lost a lot of blood. He took a bottle of whiskey from Kate's pack, pouring it over the wound to clean it. Kate hissed in pain but made no sound. I need to stitch it, Reed said. Kate pointed to a small bag in the corner of the cave. There's needle and thread in there. Reed retrieved the necessary items and began stitching the wound. His hands were steady and precise, as if he had done this many times before. You're quite good at this, Kate remarked, trying to ignore the pain. I was a field medic in the war, Reed replied. Before I moved to this valley, when the wound was stitched and bandaged, Reed helped Kate put her shirt back on. You need to rest, Catherine. You've lost a lot of blood. Kate shook her head. No time for rest. Wade will find us soon. Then we need a new plan. Kate looked into the darkness of the cave, thinking. We can use the cave passages. Some of the caves connect, forming a network under the valley. I've explored them over the past year. And Wade doesn't know about them. No one knows them fully except me. Kate looked directly into Reed's eyes. And now you. Reed nodded, understanding the trust Kate was placing in him. So we'll use them to do what? To lead Wade and the remaining men into one final trap. Kate looked at the map drawn on the cave wall, a diagram of the cave system. But first I need to rest. Just for a moment. She leaned her head against the rock wall, her eyes closing. The pain and blood loss had taken their toll. But in her fitful sleep, Kate saw John, not the smiling John, but John on his final day, with the horror and pain in his eyes as Wade Blackwood's blade came down. She jerked awake, sweating despite the cave's chill. Reed was leaning against the opposite wall, half awake. Thomas, she called, her voice hoarse. He started awake. What do you need, Catherine? I need you to tell me the truth. Kate sat up straight, ignoring the pain from her wound. How long have you been working for Wade? A heavy silence filled the cave. Reed didn't answer immediately, his eyes darkening. 6 months. He finally said, his voice so low that Kate almost didn't hear it. Since after Wade killed John. Kate didn't show surprise, although her heart ached. She had suspected this since Reed appeared too conveniently knew too much. You told them about the traps, she said, not a question. Reed nodded, not daring to meet her eyes. Some, not all. I had no choice, Catherine. Wade, he had my daughter, Sarah. She lives in Valley Cross. Wade said if I didn't help him, he would send men to kill her. Kate looked at Reed, trying to find signs of deception, but all she saw was genuine pain on the middle-aged man's face. Then why are you helping me now? You could still lead Wade here, end it all. Reed finally looked up, tears glistening in his blue eyes. Because Sarah is dead, a week ago. Wade didn't keep his promise. He sent Digger to send me a message. Kate felt a chill run down her spine. She understood Wade's cruelty well, but was still shocked by the level of his madness. I'm sorry, Thomas. No, I'm the one who should be sorry. What I've done, I betrayed John, betrayed you, all for a promise I knew would never be kept. Kate looked at the cave system map, a plan forming in her mind. Do you know anything about Wade's current plans? He'll search for you everywhere. Digger might have tracked us here. Then we'll let them find this cave. But only after we've prepared a proper welcome for them. With Reed's help, Kate began preparing for the final battle. They placed explosives at strategic locations in the cave system, connected to a system of fuses that could be activated remotely. They also created hidden escape routes known only to Kate. When Wade and his men enter the cave, we'll lure them into the large chamber. Kate explained, pointing to a section of the cave system on the map. There, the ceiling is unstable. With the right amount of explosives, we can collapse the entire area. And we'll retreat through these tunnels, Reed asked, pointing to the dotted lines on the map. Kate nodded, leading straight out to the back of the valley. From there, we can find our way to Valley Cross or the next town. Reed looked at the map with concern. This is a big gamble, Catherine. If anything doesn't go according to plan, then we die, Kate completed his sentence, her voice calm. But if we do nothing, we die anyway. At least this way we can take Wade down with us. When everything was ready, Kate and Reed concealed themselves in a small chamber connected to the large room. Through a crack in the rock wall, they could see anyone who entered. Now we wait, Kate whispered. They didn't have to wait long. Just hours later, footsteps echoed from the cave entrance. Digger Wright entered, first gun in hand, his eyes scanning every corner of the cave. Behind him came Wade Blackwood and about 10 remaining outlaws, those who had survived 5 days in the hellish valley. They were here, Digger said, pointing to the still warm ashes of a fire. Not long ago. Wade stepped forward, looking around the cave with anger. Find her, he roared. I want the widow McCrae's head. The outlaws spread out, searching every visible nook and cranny of the cave. Some moved toward the large chamber, exactly where Kate wanted them to go. Kate looked at Reed, nodding. It was time. Reed drew his gun, stepping out from their hiding place. Wade! He called loudly, his voice echoing in the cave. Wade turned, shock and anger evident on his face. Reed! "What the hell are you doing here?" "Coming to avenge my daughter Wade." Reed raised his gun but didn't shoot. Instead, he began backing toward the large chamber. She was only 19. Wade laughed, a dry and cruel sound. "Ah, the girl. Right. I had forgotten." He signaled to his men. "Kill him!" But Reed had disappeared into the large chamber with Wade and most of the outlaws following. Exactly what Kate had hoped for. She quickly moved through a secret passage to a higher position where she could see the entire large chamber. Reed was standing in the center, his gun still raised but not firing. Wade and at least 8 outlaws had entered the room surrounding him. "This is your death, Reed," Wade said, moving closer. "But first tell me where the widow is." "Right behind you, Wade." Kate's voice rang out from above. Wade turned, looking up, but seeing nothing in the darkness. "Show yourself, witch!" he roared. "I want to see your face when I blow your head off." "Look up, Wade," Kate said, her voice cold. "Look up and see your reckoning." Wade raised his head, and this time he saw a system of fuses running along the cave ceiling, connected to explosive charges placed at strategic positions. And standing on a high rock, Kate held a matchbox in her hand, ready to ignite the system. "Shoot her!" Wade shouted, but it was too late. Kate had lit the fuse, and in the brief seconds that followed, the whole world seemed to stand still. She looked down, making eye contact with Reed, and saw a small nod, understanding acceptance, perhaps even peace. Then the world exploded. The blast was deafening, the cave shaking violently as tons of rock came crashing down. Kate had already begun moving through her escape tunnel, racing against the collapse that followed her. Behind her, the screams of Wade and his men were quickly silenced by the falling rocks. The tunnel narrowed, dust filling her lungs, making it hard to breathe. A sharp rock cut her cheek as she squeezed through a tight passage. But she kept moving, driven by pure survival instinct. Finally, after what seemed like hours but was probably only minutes, Kate emerged from a small opening at the base of a cliff, far from the main cave entrance. She collapsed onto the ground, coughing and gasping for air, her wounded shoulder throbbing with renewed pain. As the dust settled and her breathing steadied, Kate looked back at the cave mouth. There was no sign of Reed or anyone else. He had stayed behind, ensuring that Wade and his men remained in the chamber until it was too late. "Goodbye, Thomas," she whispered. "May you find peace." Kate knew she needed to move. Even if the main force of outlaws was buried, there might still be stragglers, and she was in no condition to face more enemies. She pulled herself to her feet, using her rifle as a makeshift crutch, and began the long journey around the valley toward Valley Cross. Her plan was to warn the town, then perhaps continue further east, away from the memories and the blood. But as she crested a small hill, the sight below made her freeze. A snake, a large rattlesnake, coiled and ready to strike directly in her path. In her weakened state, Kate's reactions were too slow. The snake struck its fangs, sinking into her calf. Kate felt her vision already beginning to blur from the venom. She tried to reach for her knife to cut and suck out the poison as she had been taught, but her arms felt leaden, unresponsive. So this is how it ends. She thought, a strange calm settling over her. Not from Wade's bullet or blade, but from nature itself, the very valley she had turned into a weapon. As consciousness began to slip away, a distant sound caught her attention, a bugle playing a military tune she recognized from her army days. Hallucinations, she thought, the venom affecting her mind. But the sound grew louder, and with her last strength, Kate turned her head toward it. Riders were approaching, men in uniforms, led by a figure that looked strangely familiar. Catherine Davenport. A voice called, a voice she hadn't heard in years. Lieutenant Marcus Hayes, her former commanding officer from the War of 1812, the man who had discovered her secret, but kept it, allowing her to serve with dignity until the end of her term. "Here," she tried to call, but only a whisper came out. But it was enough. Hayes spotted her, immediately ordering his men to her aid. As hands lifted her gently, Kate's world faded to black, the venom and exhaustion finally overcoming her will. Kate drifted in and out of consciousness, fragments of reality mixing with fever dreams. John's face peaceful, then bloody. Reed's eyes filled with guilt and resolve. Wade's cruel smile as he approached her with a knife. Sheriff Stowe's voice reading from an invisible book. And through it all, the gentle but firm voice of Lieutenant Hayes, now apparently a captain, giving orders, changing bandages, urging her to drink bitter-tasting medicines. When she finally awoke fully, Kate found herself in an unfamiliar room, sunlight streaming through cotton curtains. She was lying on a proper bed, her shoulder bandaged professionally, her snake-bitten leg elevated on pillows. "Welcome back to the land of the living," a deep voice said. Kate turned her head to see Captain Hayes sitting in a chair beside the bed, a book open on his lap. He had aged since she'd last seen him, more gray in his black hair, deeper lines around his eyes, but the same steady gaze remained. "Where am I?" Kate asked, her voice rough from disuse. "Dr. Mitchell's house in Valley Cross. You've been unconscious for 3 days." Kate tried to sit up, wincing as pain shot through her shoulder. "Blackwood. Dead as far as we can tell," Hayes said, helping her adjust the pillows. "We found the cave-in. No way anyone survived that. We've been hunting down the stragglers, caught 4 trying to flee north. How did you find me? Why are you here?" Hayes set his book aside. "Sheriff Stowe sent me a letter before he died. He knew you and I had served together, thought you might need help. I came as soon as I could, but—" "Too late for Stowe," Kate finished. "But not too late for you." Hayes poured a glass of water and handed it to her. "Though it was a close thing. That rattlesnake venom nearly killed you. If we'd been an hour later—" Kate drank the water gratefully, her mind processing everything. "Thomas Reed." Hayes shook his head. "No sign of him. If he was in that cave with Blackwood—" Kate nodded slowly, remembering Reed's final look of acceptance. He had chosen his end, a final act of redemption for his betrayal. "The valley?" she asked. "Quite a sight," Hayes said, a hint of admiration in his voice. "I've never seen such an elaborate defense system created by one person. You've turned that entire valley into a fortress." "Not anymore. The explosions, the fires, much of it is destroyed." "Perhaps, but it served its purpose." Hayes leaned forward. "Catherine, what happened out there?" "Stowe's letter mentioned Blackwood wanted your land for gold, but there must be more to it." Kate closed her eyes, the memories washing over her. "They killed John, cut off his head because he wouldn't sell our land. I decided they wouldn't take it. Not while I lived." Hayes was silent for a moment. "And now, what will you do now?" It was a question Kate hadn't allowed herself to consider. For a year, her only thought had been survival and revenge. Now, with both achieved, what remained? "I don't know," she admitted. "There's nothing left for me in the valley." "You could come east," Hayes suggested. "The Army still has need of engineers, even if not officially. I could arrange a position consultancy work." Kate looked out the window, seeing the rooftops of Valley Cross. The town Stowe had tried to protect, where Reed's daughter had lived and died. "No," she said finally. "I think I'll stay. Not in the valley, but here. This town needs someone to watch over it now that Stowe is gone." Hayes raised an eyebrow. "You a sheriff?" The idea surprised even Kate, but as she spoke it aloud, it felt right. "Why not? I know how to handle outlaws." Hayes chuckled, then grew serious. "There's something else you should know. About Reed's daughter, Sarah." Kate tensed. "What about her?" "She's alive, Catherine. We found her at a farm outside town, hidden by an elderly couple. Reed had smuggled her out when he realized Blackwood couldn't be trusted. The message Blackwood sent him was a lie. No. Kate felt a wave of emotions, relief that the girl lived, sorrow that Reed had died believing his sacrifice was for nothing. "Does she know about her father?" "Not yet. I thought you might want to tell her when you're stronger." Kate nodded, a new resolve forming in her heart. Sarah had lost her father to Wade's cruelty, just as Kate had lost John. Perhaps in helping this girl, Kate could find a purpose beyond revenge. "Thank you, Marcus," she said, using his first name for the first time since their Army days, "for coming, even if it was almost too late." Hayes placed his hand over hers briefly. "Rest now. We can discuss the future when you're healed." As Hayes left, Kate looked out the window again, watching the people of Valley Cross going about their daily lives, unaware how close their town had come to sharing the fate of Independence Valley. They would need protection in the days ahead as news of Blackwood's defeat spread and new threats emerged. "John," she whispered to the empty room, "I kept our land, and now perhaps I can do more." The recovery took weeks. The bullet wound in Kate's shoulder healed slowly, leaving a puckered scar. The snake bite was worse. The venom had caused tissue death, and for a time Dr. Mitchell feared amputation might be necessary. But Kate's constitution was strong, and gradually the angry purple swelling receded, leaving her with a stiff leg and a permanent limp. During this time, Captain Hayes and his men had systematically hunted down the remaining members of Blackwood's gang. The last few, learning what had happened to their leader, fled the territory entirely. Kate spent her days regaining her strength and learning about Valley Cross, its people, its problems, its needs. In the evenings, she began teaching Sarah Reed, who had come to stay at Dr. Mitchell's house to help care for Kate. Sarah was 18 with her father's reddish hair and quiet manner. At first, she was withdrawn, grief-stricken after learning of her father's death. But as Kate told her the full story, how Thomas had first been forced to help Blackwood, then had chosen to sacrifice himself to end the threat, the girl began to find a measure of peace. "He thought you were dead," Kate told her one evening as they sat on the doctor's porch. "Blackwood told him they had killed you. That's why he helped me in the end. He had nothing left to lose." "But I wasn't dead," Sarah said softly. "He died thinking he'd failed to protect me." "No," Kate said firmly. "He died knowing he was stopping the man who had threatened you. Whether you were alive or dead, he was ensuring Blackwood could never hurt anyone again." Sarah considered this, then asked, "What will happen to the valley now? To your land?" Kate had been pondering this question herself. "I don't think I can live there again. Too many ghosts." "Will you sell it?" "There's still the gold." Kate shook her head. "No, I think I'll establish a trust. The valley will belong to the town, the proceeds from any mining to be used for schools protection, whatever's needed. Your father gave his life to protect that land. It seems fitting that it should serve to protect others now." Sarah's eyes filled with tears, but she nodded. He would have liked that. As Kate's strength returned, her role in the community evolved naturally. People came to her with problems, disputes over property, concerns about traveling merchants, questions about how to protect their homes. Without officially taking the title, Kate began to fill the void left by Sheriff Stowe. Captain Hayes, who had extended his stay far beyond what his superiors had authorized, watched this transformation with a mixture of pride and concern. "You're becoming the law here," he said one afternoon as they walked slowly through town, Kate using a carved wooden cane to support her still weak leg. "Someone needs to be," she replied, "and I understand how outlaws think now." Hayes stopped, turning to face her. "Catherine, I need to return east soon. Come with me. There's nothing holding you here except bad memories." Kate looked around at the town, at the people who nodded respectfully as she passed, at the children playing safely in the street, at the new schoolhouse being built with the first proceeds from the controlled mining operation that had begun in Independence Valley. "You're wrong, Marcus," she said gently. "I'm needed here. And for the first time since John died, I feel like I'm building something, not just destroying." Hayes studied her face, then sighed. "I always knew you were stubborn from the first day you showed up in my unit pretending to be a man." A smile touched his lips. "Very well, but at least let me help you make it official before I go." And so 2 months after the battle in Independence Valley, Catherine McRae was sworn in as the Sheriff of Valley Cross, with Marcus Hayes pinning the star to her jacket in a simple ceremony outside the town hall. "Never thought I'd see the day," old Dr. Mitchell muttered to no one in particular. "A woman sheriff. What's the world coming to?" "A better place, perhaps," Sarah Reed replied, watching as her mentor accepted the responsibility with quiet dignity. That evening, as Hayes prepared to depart the next morning, he and Kate shared a final conversation on the porch of what was now her home, a modest house near the center of town. "You've started something here, Catherine," he said, nursing a glass of whiskey. "A woman sheriff in 1823. There will be those who try to stop you, who won't accept your authority." "Let them try," Kate said simply, her hand unconsciously moving to the pistol at her hip, John's pistol recovered from the valley. "I have no doubt you can handle yourself," Hayes chuckled. "But remember, being the law means more than fighting. It means judgment, wisdom, knowing when not to fight." Kate nodded, thinking of Reed's sacrifice, of Stowe's loyalty, of all she had learned in that bloody valley. "I know. And I'll remember." "I'll return when I can," Hayes promised. "Perhaps by then you'll have civilized this entire territory." Kate smiled, a rare, genuine smile that reached her eyes. "Don't count on it. The West isn't meant to be fully tamed." The next morning, Hayes and his remaining men rode east, leaving Kate to face her new role alone. As she watched them disappear over the horizon, Sarah came to stand beside her. "What now, Sheriff?" the young woman asked. Kate turned to look at the town, her town now, in many ways. "Now we build Sarah. We build something worth protecting." Word of the widow sheriff spread quickly throughout the territory. Some scoffed at the idea of a woman upholding the law, but those who came to Valley Cross with ill intentions soon learned their mistake. Kate's reputation grew not just as a fearsome fighter who had single-handedly destroyed Blackwood's gang, but as a fair and incorruptible keeper of the peace. Under her protection, Valley Cross began to prosper. The mining operation in Independence Valley, carefully regulated to minimize damage to the land, brought wealth and new settlers. Kate insisted that a portion of all profits be set aside for public works, schools, roads, a proper jail, eventually even a small hospital. Sarah Reed became her deputy, the first female deputy in the territory, proving herself as capable as her mentor. Together, they trained a small force of town guards, teaching them not just how to shoot, but how to observe, how to defuse tensions before violence erupted, how to turn the landscape itself into an ally. 3 years passed in relative peace. Kate's nightmares of John's death and the battle in the valley gradually became less frequent. She never fully lost her limp, but learned to move so efficiently that it rarely hindered her. The people of Valley Cross, initially skeptical, came to respect and even love their unusual sheriff. But the West was still wild and peace was always fragile. On a warm summer evening in 1826, a rider came galloping into town, his horse lathered and near collapse. Kate was checking inventory at the general store when she heard the commotion and stepped outside. "Sheriff," the man called, practically falling from his mount. "Riders coming, 20, maybe 30 men, heavily armed." Kate felt a chill that had nothing to do with the evening breeze. "When? From where?" "Half a day behind me, coming from the south." The man was gasping for breath. "They're led by a man named Digger Wright. He's telling everyone he's come to avenge Wade Blackwood and claim the Gold Valley." Digger Wright. The name hit Kate like a physical blow. The bounty hunter had been one of the few who had escaped the valley, who knew most of what had happened there. And now he was back with a force larger than Blackwood's had been. "Sarah," Kate called, and her deputy was beside her, in moments having heard the commotion. "Ring the alarm bell. Get everyone to the town hall. Now." As the bell began to toll, the townspeople emerged from homes and businesses, confused, but responding to the signal they had rehearsed many times under Kate's insistence. Within 30 minutes, the entire population of Valley Cross, now nearly 200 people, had gathered in and around the town hall. Kate stood before them, her sheriff's star, catching the last rays of the setting sun. "Digger Wright is coming," she announced without preamble. "Those of you who have been here long enough know what that means." A murmur ran through the crowd. The story of Independence Valley had become legendary, growing with each telling, until it was hard to separate fact from fiction. But everyone knew the core truth: their sheriff had defeated a small army of outlaws through cunning and courage. "We have until morning to prepare," Kate continued. "Those unable to fight will leave tonight, heading north to Fort Jenkins. Captain Hayes left us a standing welcome there. The rest of us will make our stand here." "Against 30 armed men," someone called out. "That's suicide." Kate's gaze found the speaker, a newer settler who had arrived only months ago. "Is it? Look around you. This town has walls now. We have trained guards, we have supplies and ammunition, and we have something Digger and his men don't, something worth fighting for." She looked over the crowd, meeting the eyes of those who had been with her since the beginning. 3 years ago, I stood alone against Blackwood. Now I stand with all of you. We built this town together, and we will defend it together." A cheer rose from the old-timers, gradually spreading until even the newer residents were caught up in it. Kate raised a hand for silence. "Sarah will coordinate the evacuation of the children, the elderly, and anyone else who chooses to go. The rest report to your assigned defense positions. We've drilled for this. Now it's real." As the crowd dispersed, Dr. Mitchell approached Kate. "I'm staying," the old man said firmly. "You'll need a doctor." Kate nodded, grateful but not surprised. Mitchell had become one of her strongest supporters. "Set up in the basement of the general store. It's the most protected building." Sarah organizing the evacuation wagons caught Kate's eye across the street. A silent communication passed between them. The younger woman would oversee the departure, then return to stand with her mentor. Through the night, Valley Cross transformed. The gates in the wooden walls that now surrounded the town center were reinforced. Barricades were erected at strategic points within the streets. Water barrels were positioned in case of fire. Ammunition was distributed. Children and the elderly were loaded into wagons and sent north under escort. Kate moved through it all, directing, encouraging, her limp more pronounced with fatigue, but her voice steady. This was what she had been preparing for since the day she took the sheriff's star, not just to keep peace in good times, but to protect her people when darkness came. Dawn was breaking when Sarah returned, having seen the evacuation safely underway. She found Kate on the wall looking south toward the approaching threat. "They're coming," Kate said without turning. "Dust on the horizon." Sarah joined her, squinting against the rising sun. "I count 25 riders, heavily armed, as Michael said." Kate nodded. Outnumbered, but not as badly as before, and this time she wasn't alone. "Is everyone in position?" "Yes. The volunteers are nervous but ready. The guards are steady." Kate finally turned to look at her deputy, her friend, the daughter of the man who had given his life in Independence Valley. Sarah had grown into a formidable woman, skilled with both rifle and words respected throughout the territory. "You should have gone with the wagons," Kate said softly. Sarah raised an eyebrow, an expression she had learned from Kate herself. "You know better than to even suggest it." Kate smiled briefly, then grew serious again. "If this goes badly, if I fall, get our people out. Don't try to hold the town at all costs." "It won't come to that," Sarah said with quiet confidence. "Digger Wright is about to learn what happens to those who threaten Valley Cross." They descended from the wall, moving to their positions in the town square. The defenders, a mix of guards and armed citizens, were spread throughout the town, hidden in buildings behind barricades on rooftops. The strategy was not to meet the attackers head-on, but to let them enter, then close the trap, much as Kate had done in Independence Valley, but now with a town instead of a wilderness. The riders approached slowly, stopping just beyond rifle range. A lone figure detached from the group, riding forward with a white cloth tied to his rifle barrel. "Digger Wright?" Sarah whispered, recognizing the man from descriptions. Kate stepped out from behind the barricade, walking forward to meet the emissary. Her limp was evident, but her posture was straight, her hand resting casually on her pistol. Digger reined in his horse 10 yards away, studying her with narrowed eyes. He had aged since Kate had last seen him, more gray, in his beard, new scars on his weathered face. But the cold calculation in his eyes remained unchanged. "Catherine McRae," he said, his voice carrying in the morning stillness. "The widow sheriff." "Right," Kate acknowledged. "You've come a long way to die." A tight smile curved Digger's lips. Bold words from a crippled woman facing 30 armed men. 25, Kate corrected. "And you should know better than anyone that I don't need 2 good legs to put you in the ground." Digger's smile faded. "You cost me everything, widow. My reputation, my standing with the territorial governor. After the Valley, no one would hire me for honest tracking work again." "You chose your side," Kate said simply. "You rode with Blackwood. You helped kill innocent people. And now I've come to finish what Wade started." Digger gestured to the town behind her. "But it doesn't have to be bloody. Send out the deeds to the Gold Valley and we'll be on our way." Kate almost laughed. "The Valley doesn't belong to me anymore. It belongs to the town held in trust. Even if I wanted to, I couldn't give you what you want." Digger's expression hardened. "Then we'll take it anyway after we burn this town to the ground." "You can try," Kate said, turning to walk back toward the barricade. "But remember Independence Valley, right? Remember what happened to the last group of men who thought I was easy prey." She didn't look back, but she could feel Digger's eyes boring into her as she retreated. The negotiations, such as they were, had ended exactly as she'd expected. Now would come the battle. When she reached the barricade, Sarah was waiting. "What did he say?" "Exactly what we expected. He wants the Valley. He'll try to take the town to get it." Sarah checked her rifle. "Then let's make him regret it." Sir, they didn't have to wait long. Within the hour, Digger's men had surrounded the town and begun their attack. They came first with fire arrows, attempting to burn the wooden walls, but Kate had anticipated this. The walls had been soaked with water through the night, and defenders quickly extinguished any flames that caught. Frustrated, the attackers then tried a direct assault on the main gate. This too had been expected. As they concentrated their forces, hidden defenders on the rooftops opened fire, cutting down several men before they could retreat. By midday, the pattern was established. Digger would probe the town's defenses from different directions, losing men each time, becoming increasingly frustrated. But Kate knew better than to grow complacent. Wright was testing, learning, looking for weaknesses. The real attack would come later. As the sun began to set, Kate gathered her core defenders in the town hall. "They'll come tonight," she said, pointing to a map of the town. "A coordinated attack from multiple directions, hoping to overwhelm us in the darkness." "We're running low on ammunition," one of the guards reported. "Another full night of fighting, and we'll be down to what's in our guns." Kate had expected this. Use it wisely, make every shot count. And remember, we have the advantage of position and knowledge of the terrain. The words echoed those she had spoken to herself in Independence Valley, but the circumstances couldn't be more different. Then she had been alone, fueled by grief and revenge. Now she stood with a community protecting a future they had built together. As predicted, the main attack came at midnight. Digger's men struck from 3 directions simultaneously, using the cover of darkness. This time they had learned from their earlier failures. They moved in smaller groups, used cover more effectively, deployed their own snipers to target the defenders on the rooftops. The fighting was intense and chaotic. Kate moved through the town, directing the defense, firing her rifle with deadly accuracy when needed, pulling wounded defenders to safety. Her leg ached fiercely, but she ignored it, pushing her body beyond its limits. In the midst of the battle, she lost track of Sarah. The younger woman had been commanding the defense of the eastern approach, where the fighting was particularly fierce. Kate felt a stab of worry, but couldn't spare the time to look for her deputy. Every defender was needed at their post. As dawn approached, the attackers withdrew again, leaving their dead behind. Kate, exhausted and blood-spattered, made her way to the general store where Dr. Mitchell was treating the wounded. "Casualties?" she asked, leaning heavily on her cane. "3 dead, 8 wounded, 2 critically," Mitchell reported, not looking up from the man whose leg he was stitching. "We can't sustain another night like this, Catherine." Kate nodded grimly. "We won't have to. By my count, Wright has lost at least 10 men. He can't maintain the siege much longer. Unless he receives reinforcements," a voice said from the doorway. Kate turned to see Sarah, her face streaked with dirt and gunpowder, a bloody bandage wrapped around her left arm. Relief flooded through Kate at the sight of her deputy alive, if wounded. "What do you mean, reinforcements?" Kate asked. Sarah stepped closer, lowering her voice. "One of the prisoners we took in the night raid. Before he died, he said Wright sent for help from a gang operating near Fort Jenkins." Kate felt a chill. Fort Jenkins, where they had sent their most vulnerable citizens. When, 2 days ago, if they're coming fast, they could arrive by nightfall. Kate finished, her mind racing. The defense had held but barely. Their ammunition was low, their defenders exhausted. Another night of fighting, especially against fresh enemies, would likely mean defeat. She looked around the makeshift hospital at the wounded men and women who had risked everything to defend their home. They deserved better than a last stand. "We need to end this now," Kate said, her voice hardening with resolve, "before reinforcements arrive." "How?" Sarah asked. "We can barely hold the town as it is." Kate's mind flashed back to Independence Valley, to the final confrontation in the cave. "We need to cut off the head. Without Wright, the rest will scatter." Understanding dawned in Sarah's eyes. "You're going after Digger yourself." "Not alone." Kate turned to the others in the room, the walking wounded, the tired defenders. "I need volunteers. A small group, fast and quiet. While the main force continues to defend the town, we slip out and target Wright directly." The plan was dangerous, perhaps suicidal. But as Kate laid it out, volunteers stepped forward, men and women who had come to believe in their sheriff, who trusted her judgment even when it seemed impossible. By mid-morning, the group was assembled: Kate, Sarah, and 5 others, all skilled with both gun and knife, all willing to risk everything. They would exit through a hidden culvert Kate had installed beneath the western wall circle, around to where intelligence placed Wright's command post, and strike when least expected. As they prepared to leave, Dr. Mitchell pulled Kate aside. "You're not in condition for this," he said bluntly, nodding at her leg. "You've been on your feet for 2 days straight. That leg won't carry you much further." Kate met his gaze steadily. "It doesn't need to carry me much further. Just far enough." Mitchell studied her face, then sighed. "You never intended to come back from this, did you?" Kate didn't answer directly. Instead, she placed a sealed envelope in his hand. "If I don't return, give this to Sarah. It contains my wishes for the town, for the valley." "Catherine," Mitchell began, but Kate was already moving away, joining the others at the hidden exit. The small group slipped out of town unnoticed, using the terrain and the midday sun to avoid detection. They moved slowly, carefully, every sense alert for patrols or sentries. Kate led them on a winding path through gullies and brush, her knowledge of the landscape, allowing them to remain hidden despite moving in broad daylight. By late afternoon, they had positioned themselves on a rocky ridge overlooking Wright's camp. Through her spyglass, Kate could see Digger himself conferring with his lieutenants outside a large tent. Their quarry was in sight, but reaching him would be the challenge. "We wait until dusk," Kate whispered to the others. "When they're preparing for the night attack, the confusion will cover our approach." As the sun began to set, Kate noticed increased activity in the camp men, cleaning weapons, distributing ammunition, preparing for another assault on the town. The moment was approaching. She turned to her companions, these brave souls who had followed her into what might be their last battle. "Remember, our target is right. Once he falls, we create as much chaos as possible, then withdraw. The town needs you alive more than it needs you to be heroes." Sarah, crouching beside her, caught her gaze. "That applies to you too, Sheriff." Kate only nodded, not making a promise she didn't intend to keep. As twilight deepened, they began their advance, moving silently down the rocky slope toward the outlaw camp. Kate's leg threatened to buckle with each step, but she gritted her teeth and pushed on. This would end tonight one way or another. They had almost reached the perimeter when disaster struck. A sentry hidden better than they had anticipated spotted their movement and raised the alarm. Gunshots rang out, and the element of surprise was lost. "Change of plans," Kate shouted. "Charge straight for Wright's tent. Don't stop for anything." The small group broke into a run, firing as they went. The outlaws, caught off guard by the bold attacks, scattered momentarily, allowing Kate and her people to penetrate deep into the camp before organized resistance formed. Kate saw Digger emerging from his tent, rifle in hand. Their eyes met across the chaos of the battlefield, and a silent understanding passed between them. This was the final reckoning, 3 years in the making. Kate raised her rifle and fired, but Digger was already moving. The bullet grazed his shoulder, spinning him but not dropping him. He returned fire, his shot going wide as Sarah tackled Kate to the ground, saving her from a bullet that would have taken her head. Around them, the battle was intensifying. 2 of their volunteers were down, but the remaining 3 were creating havoc throughout the camp, setting fires, overturning supplies, drawing attention away from Kate and Sarah. "Go back," Kate ordered Sarah, struggling to her feet. "Lead the others out. I'll finish this." "Not alone," Sarah insisted, reloading her pistol. "We finish this together." Before Kate could argue further, Digger appeared through the smoke, now wielding 2 pistols. "McCrae!" he roared, firing both weapons. Kate and Sarah dived in opposite directions, the bullets passing between them. Kate rolled to her feet, ignoring the screaming pain in her leg, and drew John's pistol. She fired once, hitting Digger in the chest, but the man was wearing some kind of armor beneath his coat. He staggered but didn't fall. Sarah fired next, her bullet taking Digger in the arm, causing him to drop one of his pistols. But still he came on like a wounded bear, seemingly unstoppable. Kate knew they were running out of time. The initial confusion in the camp was fading, and outlaws were beginning to converge on their position. If they didn't end this soon, they would be surrounded. "The tent," she called to Sarah. "Drive him back inside." Understanding immediately, Sarah changed her angle of fire, forcing Digger to retreat toward his command tent. Kate circled around her leg, dragging now blood seeping through her trousers, where the old wound had reopened. Digger backed into his tent, still firing, but now with calculated precision rather than rage. Kate saw Sarah jerk back, a bullet grazing her shoulder, but the younger woman kept advancing, emptying her pistol at the tent opening. With Digger momentarily pinned down, Kate made her move. She limped rapidly to the back of the tent, pulled a knife, and slashed through the canvas. She rolled inside, coming face to face with Wright in the dim interior. "Hello, Digger," she said, and drove her knife into his side, finding the gap in his armor. Wright howled in pain and backhanded Kate across the face, sending her crashing into a table. Maps and lanterns went flying, one of the lanterns breaking and spilling oil across the tent floor. Kate scrambled to recover, but her leg finally gave out completely. She collapsed, watching as Digger pulled the knife from his side, blood pouring from the wound. "You should have died in that valley," he snarled, advancing on her with her own knife. "So should you," Kate replied, drawing John's pistol one last time. They fired simultaneously, right with a hidden derringer, Kate with the flintlock. In the confined space, both shots found their mark. Kate felt a burning pain in her chest as Digger's bullet struck her. But she had the satisfaction of seeing her own shot take right in the throat, his eyes widening in shock as he fell backward. The spilled lamp oil ignited flames racing across the tent floor. Kate tried to move to crawl toward the exit, but her body refused to respond. The smoke was thickening, the heat intensifying. "Kate!" Sarah's voice came from outside, desperate. "Kate, where are you? Go!" Kate managed to call, her voice weak. "Get everyone out, it's done." She heard movement tearing fabric, and suddenly Sarah was there, dragging her through a new opening cut in the tent wall. The younger woman's face was streaked with tears and soot, her determination evident in every line of her body. "I won't leave you," Sarah said fiercely, pulling Kate away from the burning tent as it collapsed, consuming Wright's body. Around them, the outlaw camp was in chaos. With their leader dead and their command tent in flames, the remaining men were fleeing in all directions. Kate's volunteers, seeing their sheriff wounded, converged to provide cover as Sarah and another defender lifted Kate between them. The journey back to town was a blur of pain and fading consciousness for Kate. She was aware of being carried of whispered encouragements of Sarah's voice ordering her not to die. But the bullet in her chest had done its work, and Kate could feel her life ebbing away with each painful breath. By the time they reached Valley Cross, dawn was breaking again. The town had held through the night, its defenders buoyed by reports that the outlaw leadership had been thrown into chaos by the raid. Dr. Mitchell was waiting at the gate, his face grim as he saw Kate's condition. "Get her to the hospital. Now." They laid her on a clean table in what had once been the general store basement and was now a blood-soaked field hospital. Mitchell cut away her shirt, exposing the bullet wound just below her collarbone. "The bullet's lodged near her heart," he said after examination. "I need to operate immediately." Sarah, her own wounds forgotten, gripped Kate's hand. "You're going to be fine. You hear me, Kate? You're going to live." Kate managed a weak smile. "Always giving orders." She coughed, blood speckling her lips. "Digger." "Dead," Sarah confirmed. "You got him, and his men are scattering. The reinforcements never showed up. They must have been a bluff." Kate nodded, slightly relieved. "The town is safe then. The valley is safe." Mitchell was preparing his instruments, rolling up his sleeves. "I'm going to have to ask you to leave, Sarah. I need space to work." "No," Kate whispered. "Let her stay. I need to tell her." Another coughing fit interrupted her, more blood coming up. Mitchell exchanged a look with Sarah, both recognizing what Kate already knew: the wound was fatal. The doctor stepped back, giving them a moment of privacy. "Listen to me," Kate said, her voice fading but urgent. "The town needs a sheriff, someone who understands what we built here." "Don't," Sarah said, tears streaming down her face. "Don't you dare give me your job. You're going to be fine." Kate gripped Sarah's hand with surprising strength. "You're ready. You've been ready for a long time. I just wasn't ready to let go." She coughed again, the pain in her chest intensifying. "Promise me you'll protect them. The town, the valley, everything we built." Sarah nodded, unable to speak through her tears. "And promise me you'll live. Really live. Not just survive like I did for so long." "I promise," Sarah whispered. Kate's vision was beginning to darken around the edges, but she felt a strange peace descending. She thought of John of the Valley, where they had tried to build a life of all that had happened since his death. She had survived when she hadn't expected to, had built something lasting from the ashes of tragedy. "Tell them," she managed, her voice barely audible now, "that the widow kept her promise." With those words, Catherine McRae, soldier, widow, sheriff, protector, closed her eyes for the final time, her battle finally over. The story of Catherine McRae and how she transformed Independence Valley into a death trap for Wade Blackwood's gang spread throughout the territory, growing with each telling until it reached near mythical status. The tale of the widow who rigged an entire valley, who later became the first female sheriff in the territory and died protecting her town, became the stuff of frontier legend. Sarah Reed honored her mentor's final wishes. She accepted the sheriff's star, continuing Kate's work of building Valley Cross into a beacon of civilization and justice in the wild territory. Under her leadership, the town flourished, becoming an important hub for trade and settlement. The mining operations in Independence Valley continued, carefully managed to preserve the land while providing for the town's needs. A portion of the proceeds funded a school named after Catherine McRae, where girls were educated alongside boys, a revolutionary concept for the time, but one that Sarah insisted upon, knowing Kate would have wanted it. Captain Marcus Hayes returned upon hearing of Kate's death, arriving too late for the funeral, but in time to help Sarah solidify her position as sheriff against those who challenged a woman's right to wear the badge. He brought with him official recognition from the territorial governor, posthumous honors for Catherine McRae's service, and formal appointment papers for Sheriff Sarah Reed. She would have hated the ceremony, Hayes remarked as they stood before Kate's grave, a simple marker on a quiet hill overlooking both the town and, in the distance, Independence Valley. But she would have loved seeing what the town has become, Sarah replied, the sheriff's star glinting on her jacket just as it had on Kate's. What will you do with the valley itself? Hayes asked. There are still those who will come for the gold, even with Blackwood and Wright gone. Sarah smiled slightly, a smile reminiscent of her mentors. The valley protects itself, Captain. Kate made sure of that. Indeed, rumors persisted that Catherine McRae had left one final legacy, that parts of Independence Valley remained rigged with traps and defenses that only she had known about. Whether true or merely convenient legend, the story served to discourage would-be claim jumpers and outlaws. The valley gained a reputation as haunted ground, protected by the spirit of the widow who had turned it into a weapon. 5 years after Kate's death, on the anniversary of the battle with Digger Wright, Sarah Reed stood on the town wall, looking out toward Independence Valley in the distance. The town had grown considerably, new buildings, new streets, nearly 1,000 residents now. A stagecoach line connected them to the larger settlements east and west. A telegraph office had opened the previous year. Valley Cross was becoming a proper city, everything Catherine McRae had fought and died for. Yet Sarah knew that the peace they enjoyed was fragile, built on sacrifice and vigilance. She touched the sheriff's star on her chest, thinking of the woman who had worn it first, who had taught her that true strength came not just from fighting, but from building something worth protecting. "We kept our promise, Kate," she whispered to the wind. "The land is safe. The people are safe." In the distance, the sun set over Independence Valley, painting the landscape in shades of gold and crimson blood, and treasure the twin forces that had shaped the destiny of Catherine McRae and all those whose lives she had touched. The valley that had been a battlefield was now a memorial, a reminder that even in the wild frontier, justice could prevail against overwhelming odds. And somewhere in that valley, according to local legend, the traps and defenses created by the widow still waited, ready to protect what she had loved, long after she herself had passed into history. A stagecoach rattled along the well-maintained road leading to what was now called McRae City, formerly Valley Cross. The town had grown into a proper settlement, with brick buildings, gas-lit streets, and a population approaching 5,000. The wilderness that had once dominated the territory had given way to farms, ranches, and civilization. Inside the coach sat a distinguished gentleman in his early 60s, silver hair visible beneath his expensive hat, his uniform jacket marked with the insignia of a full colonel. Marcus Hayes looked out the window as the landscape passed by, noting how much had changed since his last visit over a decade ago. "First time to McRae City, sir?" asked a young man seated across from him. Hayes smiled slightly. "No, young man. I knew it when it was just Valley Cross, and before that when it was hardly more than a trading post." The young man's eyes widened with interest. "Then you must know the stories about Sheriff McRae and Independence Valley." "I knew Catherine McRae," Hayes said simply. "The stories don't do her justice." The coach fell silent as the other passengers regarded Hayes with new respect and curiosity. The legend of the widow sheriff had only grown with time, embellished and romanticized until she had become almost mythical, the woman who had single-handedly defeated 2 outlaw gangs and established law in a lawless territory. When the coach rolled into McRae City, Hayes was struck by the transformation. The wooden wall that had once surrounded the small town was gone, replaced by proper streets extending in all directions. A large bronze statue stood in the central square, a woman with a sheriff's star standing tall. Despite the walking stick in her hand, her gaze fixed determinedly forward. Hayes smiled at the likeness of Catherine. It captured her spirit, if not the exhaustion and pain she had carried in her final years. The inscription at the base read simply, Sheriff Catherine McRae, she protected what mattered. A tall woman in her late 30s approached as Hayes stood contemplating the statue. Her reddish hair was streaked with silver, and she wore a modified sheriff's uniform, the star on her chest polished to a high shine. Colonel Hayes! Sheriff Sarah Reed greeted him, extending her hand. It's been too long. Hayes took her hand warmly. Sheriff Reed, or should I say Mayor Reed, now? Sarah smiled. Both for the time being, until the next election when I can finally retire from law enforcement. The town council insisted I keep both positions through the anniversary celebrations. They began walking through the town, Hayes marveling at the changes. A proper courthouse stood where the old town hall had been. A 3-story school building bore Catherine McRae's name. Well-dressed citizens nodded respectfully to their mayor as they passed. She would hardly recognize it, Hayes remarked. I think she'd be pleased, Sarah replied, though she'd probably complain about all the noise and people. They shared a knowing smile, both remembering Kate's preference for solitude and simplicity. Is that why you've come back, Colonel, for the anniversary? Hayes nodded. 20 years since Independence Valley. The War Department thought it appropriate to send a representative given Kate's military service during the War of 1812. Even though they never officially recognized her as a soldier, Sarah noted with a hint of bitterness. Times are changing slowly, Hayes said. Her story has inspired more women to push boundaries. There's talk of a formal recognition, at last posthumous, though it may be. They reached a small but elegant house near the center of town, Sarah's residence, which doubled as the mayor's office. Inside, maps and documents covered a large desk, evidence of the administrative duties that had largely replaced peacekeeping in the now civilized settlement. Sarah poured 2 glasses of whiskey, not the rough frontier spirit of years past, but a quality Kentucky bourbon. They raised their glasses in a silent toast to the woman whose shadow still loomed large over the town that bore her name. Tell me about Independence Valley, Hayes said after a moment. The stagecoach wouldn't go near it. The driver still claims it's haunted. Sarah smiled enigmatically. The valley has a certain reputation. It keeps people respectful. So the stories about Kate's final traps are useful, Sarah finished for him. Let's just say that certain parts of the valley remain protected. Kate taught me everything she knew, Colonel, including how to use fear as effectively as gunpowder. Hayes chuckled. She'd be proud of you, Sarah. You've built something remarkable here. Hey, we all did, Sarah corrected him. Kate laid the foundation. You provided the support from the territorial government. The people who stayed and built after the battles did the rest. She moved to a cabinet and retrieved an old leather-bound book. Kate's journal. She started keeping it after John died. I've never shown it to anyone else, but I think she'd want you to see it. Hayes accepted the book carefully, feeling the weight of history in his hands. He opened it to find Catherine's precise handwriting, filling the pages diagrams of traps, maps of the valley, tactical notes, but also more personal reflections. Her thoughts on justice, on rebuilding, on finding purpose after devastating loss. I'll read it tonight, Hayes promised, closing the book gently. Tomorrow will you take me to the valley? I'd like to pay my respects properly. Sarah nodded. Fair warning, I won't show you all her tricks. Some secrets deserve to remain buried. Just like Kate herself, Hayes agreed. The next morning they rode out to Independence Valley, Sarah on a magnificent bay mare, Hayes on a borrowed gelding that thankfully had an easy gait for his aging bones. The valley looked peaceful now, acres of protected wilderness surrounded by prosperous farms and ranches. A simple stone marker stood at the entrance, warning travelers of the valley's historical significance and potential dangers. They followed a safe path that Sarah had established years ago, leading to a small rise overlooking the heart of the valley. There, beneath an old oak tree, stood a simple gravestone. Catherine, Kate McRae, 1787-1826. She kept her promise. Hayes dismounted with a grunt and approached the grave. He stood silently for a long moment, then reached into his coat and withdrew a small velvet box. The War Department sent this, he said, opening the box to reveal a medal, the newly created Veteran's Honor, with Catherine's name engraved on the back. Too little, too late, but I thought she should have it anyway. He placed the medal at the base of the stone, then stepped back. Sarah joined him, and together they looked out over the valley that had been both battlefield and salvation. You know, Hayes said after a while, when I first met Catherine Davenport during the War of 1812, I thought she was the most stubborn soldier I'd ever encountered. Even after I discovered she was a woman, she refused to give up her post. The artillery calculations are wrong, she told me, and men will die if they're not corrected. She was right, of course. Sarah smiled. That sounds like Kate. I often wondered what her life might have been if the army had allowed her to serve openly, if she hadn't had to hide who she was to do what she was born to do. Hayes shook his head. But then perhaps she wouldn't have met John, wouldn't have come west, wouldn't have saved this valley or founded your town. I don't think Kate believed in fate, Sarah said, but she did believe in making the best of whatever hand you're dealt. She turned this valley into a weapon when she needed to fight. Then she turned a rough frontier town into a community when it needed leadership. Hayes nodded thoughtfully. And what about you? Mayor Reed, what will you build next now that the town is established and the frontier is pushing ever westward? Sarah looked toward the distant mountains where new settlements were emerging, where new challenges awaited. Kate once told me that the West isn't meant to be fully tamed. I think she was right, but it can be made just more equal. There's still work to be done there. Always the sheriff, Hayes observed with a smile. Always, Sarah agreed. Even when I finally hang up the star, I'll still be keeping the peace in my own way. Kate taught me that the battle for justice never really ends. It just changes form. They remained by the grave until the sun began to set, casting long shadows across Independence Valley. As they mounted their horses to return to town, Hayes took one last look at the peaceful landscape, trying to reconcile it with the battlefield it had once been. Do you think she found peace in the end? He asked. Sarah considered the question carefully. I think she found purpose, which meant more to her than peace. She died protecting what mattered. That was enough for Kate. As they rode back toward McRae City, the setting sun painted the valley in shades of gold and crimson, the same colors that had defined Catherine McRae's life. Blood and treasure, sacrifice and legacy woven together into a story that would be told for generations to come. The story of a widow who turned an entire valley into a trap, who built justice from revenge, and whose final legacy was not the battles she fought, but the community she made possible, a community that continued to thrive, to grow, and to remember. In the deepening twilight, some said they could still hear the whisper of wind through Kate's hidden flutes, still standing guard in the secret corners of Independence Valley. A reminder that the land itself never forgets those who loved it enough to fight for it, to die for it, and most importantly, to live for what comes after the fighting is done. 50 years after Catherine McRae's final battle, a young historian from the East arrived in McRae City, now a thriving community of nearly 15,000 souls. Emma Pearson had come to research the legendary widow sheriff for a book about pioneering women of the frontier. The town had changed beyond recognition. A railroad station bustled with activity, telegraph lines connected it to cities across the nation, and photographs of the founding sheriff hung in nearly every public building. Catherine McRae had passed from history into legend, her story taught to school children, alongside tales of other frontier heroes. Emma's research led her to the town archives, where she discovered Sarah Reed's personal papers donated after the second sheriff's death some 10 years earlier. Among them was Catherine's journal, now carefully preserved, along with Sarah's own writings about her mentor and friend. As Emma pored over these primary sources, separating fact from the embellishments of 50 years of storytelling, she came to understand Catherine McRae as more than just a legend, as a woman of flesh and blood, of pain and determination, whose extraordinary actions had grown from ordinary human emotions, grief, love, and the drive to protect what mattered. On her final day in McRae City, Emma hired a guide to take her to Independence Valley, now a national historical preserve. Much of the valley remained undeveloped, protected by both law and lingering superstition. The guide, a weathered man named Joseph Reed, Sarah's grandson, led her along the official path to Catherine's grave, now marked by a more substantial monument than the original simple stone. Is it true that parts of the valley are still rigged with Sheriff McRae's traps? Emma asked as they stood by the grave. Joseph smiled mysteriously. That's what they say. Grandmother never confirmed nor denied it, even to family. She just said the valley protects its own. Emma looked out over the peaceful landscape, trying to imagine it as it had been during those bloody days of 1823. Your grandmother wrote that Catherine McRae never wanted to be a legend, that she was just a woman doing what needed to be done. That's the thing about legends, Miss Pearson, Joseph replied. The real ones never set out to become stories. They're just people facing impossible odds who refuse to back down. As they prepared to leave, Emma noticed something curious. A faint whistling sound carried on the breeze, almost musical in its cadence. Wind through the rocks, Joseph explained, though his eyes held a glint of something more. Or so most folks believe. Emma smiled, understanding the power of a story that remained partially untold, a mystery that continued to protect what Catherine McRae had fought for. In her book, she would present the facts as she had discovered them, but she would preserve this final secret of Independence Valley. Some legends, after all, served a purpose beyond mere history. They reminded people that justice sometimes came from unexpected sources, that courage wore many faces, and that a single determined individual could change the course of countless lives to come. As they rode back toward town, Emma glanced over her shoulder for one last look at the valley. For just a moment, in the play of light and shadow among the distant rocks, she could almost imagine she saw a figure standing watch, a woman with a rifle and a crimson scarf keeping her promise long after her name had passed into legend.